Bryce Harper is the face of the Phillies franchise. Bryce Harper is the guy who this entire era has been established around. Bryce Harper is a two-time MVP, eight-time All-Star, former Rookie of the Year, four-time Silver Slugger, and an NLCS MVP. But has that moment faded him? It has been an ugly start to the season for Bryce Harper, with some concerning stats beginning to pop to the timeline, pop to the forefront of the conversation. And I want to gauge what the level of concern out there is for Harper. Now, leading this conversation, I did want to pull up this stat coming from Jason Stark yesterday on 97.5 that shared a troubling stat about Bryce Harper when he joined Unfiltered, saying, quote, according to StatCast, there are 276 full-time players. Where would you guess that Bryce ranks in average exit velocity in that group? How about 235th? I get that it's early, but doesn't it feel like that is an accurate description of how out of sync he has been? And I do think out of sync is a nice way to put what the plate approaches look like to this point. There are some concerning signs for how Bryce Harper has looked at the dish thus far, but the message that I do want to make loud and clear is it is a long season, everybody. It is a marathon. That I'm not judging Bryce Harper on how he looks today. I'm going to judge him on how he looks over the course of the season, and there is a lot of time to make up ground. Now, to speak a little bit about on his current outlook, I did want to dive into this article coming from The Good Fight right here that took a nice look at sort of the profile of him as a hitter. And what it writes up is, there is no reason to belabor the point about elite/not elite that was beaten into the offseason. It's tiresome and boring. Instead, let's reshape the question. What would make Dave Dombrowski even say that? Pitchers are going to try and see what Harper still has. One might think that they'll try and get him to chase, since that was one of the issues in the season last year. We only have a sample size of 71 pitches thrown to him, so you can imagine the heat map is all over the place. And I will note this is before the home run, which I will mention in a little bit there, but the article continues. This doesn't really tell us much about anything, so instead, here are pitchers trying to approach. How are pitchers trying to approach him? We've seen a steady decline in pitchers throwing him fastball, since that is where he does a lot of damage. The rise in breaking ball usage is continuing, even if, again, it is just 71 pitches in total. Yet this is worth watching as the season progresses. Harper's bat speed so far suggests that there hasn't been a fall off there, but the steady diet of breaking pitches that are going out of the zone are going to continue from the looks of it. How he fares will likely determine the next chapter of his career. And you can see a little bit of the pitch profile that he has facing there, but I will note here, it hasn't exactly matched what the eye test has been from my perspective here. The biggest thing that has been a legitimate red flag to me is I've seen Bryce Harper get gassed by a couple fastballs in a way that I just never imagined could possibly be the case. That when I think of Bryce Harper at his peak as a baseball player, one of the clearest visions that I see of him is when he tries to get beaten by a pitcher tries to beat him with a fastball, and he just straight up turns and rips that thing over the fence right there. That has not been the Bryce Harper that we've seen this year. In fact, I've seen him be late on a number of those fastballs to this point. Now, the breaking balls are obviously a clear part of this conversation, and maybe the bigger picture of that conversation here circles back to the lineup or lack of lineup protection that he does have on this Phillies team. That it still doesn't really make sense to me, the lineup that they're rolling with Trey Turner batting leadoff. Have no problem with that there. Kyle Schwarber batting second, which that's where I start to get interesting there. And Bryce Harper batting third with Alec Boehm primarily coming up behind him there. Now, Adalis Garcia has looked pretty impressive thus far. He's been absolutely as advertised, and I do think that's going to be a guy that makes a push for that cleanup spot. He definitely has a little bit more pop than what we see in Alec Boehm right there. But frankly, I would just be flipping the 2 spot and 3 spot. Now, I know Bryce Harper has said publicly that he will bat wherever Rob Thomson wants him. I do wonder if that conversation is a bit different behind the scenes if he wants to be a 3-hole hitter. We've seen a little bit of pushback to that over the years right there when he is asked about the conversation, but it makes a lot more sense to me to have Bryce Harper batting in the 2 slot and have Kyle Schwarber behind him. That's legitimate lineup protection. That's the best hitter on this Phillies team, at least the guy that strikes the most fear into opposing pitchers in its current form. That's something that I think is worth experimenting with. And to contrast Bryce Harper with Kyle Schwarber right there, Kyle Schwarber is still in a spot where he just needs one pitch to do his maximum damage. That you see it in a plate appearance. You see it in at bat that he's sitting on it. He's waiting. And when he gets that one pitch that he's looking for, that thing is a no-doubter from the second that it hits it bat. For Bryce Harper, I need a little bit more of that. Now, again, I do not want to sound the panic alarms right here. There does seem I would guess, higher level of concern than probably should be the case at this stage of the season. Bryce Harper is still a damn good ball player. And for what it's worth, he is off the snide a little bit as he did hit his first home run against the Washington Nationals, which sort of sparked a little bit of a comeback there. And I will also note, a moonshot there. 425 feet is what I believe it officially landed at. It was needed for Bryce Harper. And I do think beyond just the production and obviously it helping the comeback effort in that game right there, he just needed to see one go over the fence. Sometimes you got to see the ball go through the hoop, and that was kind of an example for that for Bryce Harper. but we are seeing sort of the immediate reactions of people ready to tear him down, ready to jump off the bandwagon. We're seeing, and I get this coming from a Washington Nationals perspective, but the point still carries that I've seen these in Philadelphia media circles of Bryce Harper TikToks made this year, 9. Bryce Harper hits this year, 1. A 230 OPS is just not a good look. Now, there is no argument about the standpoint of he has not been as advertised or as the team needs him. For all the talk about the excitement of the youthful movement, what we're seeing from Justin Crawford, what we're seeing from Andrew Painter, from the new additions like Adalis Garcia, having other big figures in this lineup, the Kyle Schwarbers, the Trey Turners, seeing each of these guys make the respective impacts. This entire era is still defined by who Bryce Harper is as a baseball player. This is still dependent on him being the face of this Phillies franchise, and they need him to rise back up to that caliber of player once again. I'm not taking that off the table. What I think this is probably a slow start to the year that he does eventually wake up. I also think it is worth noting this is kind of the same Bryce Harper that we saw in the World Baseball Classic, that I know he had that one monster home run at a massive moment for Team USA. But the reality is a lot of these same concerning signs that we're seeing so far this year, that was put on display on that stage right there. That he was behind on a ton of fastballs. He was looking like he was guessing a lot of pitches. He was striking out at a high rate, and all that is translated over. This should have been the Bryce Harper that we expected out of the gates. And I think a lot of people had this theory or belief that it would be just a bat out of hell speed out of the gates this year because of how pissed off he is from the elite comments from Dave Dombrowski. I do believe that is still bothersome to Bryce Harper, but I also cannot guarantee that that's the way that he works as far as I'm pissed off, I'm going to show up and basically prove my general manager or president of baseball operations wrong. I also think there's a side of things that it's like kind of like, why am I showing up for a guy that does not believe in me? Now, granted, Bryce is a competitor. At some point or another, the cream is going to rise to the top. His talent level is going to shine, and he will hit a really strong stretch of this season. If anything, I think there should be looked at it as a little bit positively that the team is managing to tread water without their best player looking like any semblance of their best player. And to dive in a couple of the full stats for this team as a whole, you can see the numbers for Bryce. A 120 batting average, not going to do it. A 185 OBP, even more concerning. A 240 slugging percentage of 425 OPS. Those are ugly numbers based on the standards. A negative 0.2 WAR. You expect better. We're also seeing some poor performances from other guys. Trey Turner hitting 192 at the dish, 250 OPS, 231 slugging, 481 OPS with a negative 0.4 WAR there. That's a concerning number. Kyle Schwarber in a negative WAR. Edmundo Sosa, Otto Kemp, Bryson Stott, all these guys with negative WAR numbers right now. I bring all this up to say, just relax, everybody. There is a lot more baseball to be played. I'm confident that Bryce Harper will find his stride and look like the elite caliber talent that he has proven to be throughout his career. And then everything will make a lot more sense on this Phillies team when that is the case. It wasn't the ideal start to the season for this Phillies team, but you absolutely can find some reasons for a belief. Look at how Justin Crawford has looked. Look at how Andrew Painter pitched. Look at some of the flashes from the bullpen, although there has been some more concerning signs that I would prefer to be the case right there. Bryson Stott, I'm encouraged by what we've seen from them. Edmundo Sosa showing a spark. Adalis Garcia. There's a lot going on with this Phillies team right now. We are still in the early stages of the season, and a lot more questions are still to be answered. So for the Bryce Harper panic, just relax. That would be my message right there. It is early. He's going to find his stride. And if he is still performing to this level a couple months down the line, 50 games into the season or something like that, then all of a sudden I can hear out the argument a little bit. But we're not there yet, and I got to get to that point before I can reach that level of concern. So let me know what you guys think about all that in the comments. I am not worried about Bryce Harper at this stage of the game. I do believe this is just a little bit of a tough start to the season, and he will ultimately settle in and find his role. Let me know if you guys see things the same way as me. Appreciate you guys for tuning into these videos here. If you have not yet, make sure to smash that subscribe button. Drop a like on this video here, and I'll be back talking to you next time right here on Phillies Digest. Peace.